This podcast is part of E2C Network, where we share the whole Auburn experience.
Where you go, Auburn fans? Welcome to No Huddle, your source for Auburn football news and discussion, part of the E2C Network. I'm AJ Richardson. I'm also here with Jared Davis. It's Iron Bowl week, rivalry week. Auburn's playing Alabama in Tuscaloosa. It'll be an afternoon game, and Bama's coming in a little gimpy. They're now 8-3. Just lost to an unranked Oklahoma team. Also lost to an unranked at the time Vanderbilt team. They did so. Like, this is, I feel like this is kind of uncharted water a little bit for Alabama, in kind of, in the last few years where they've had Saban, they would not be in this position. Alabama, as far as like current rankings go, I was looking at the AP poll. We're recording this on Sunday night, so we won't have the college football playoff actual rankings, but the AP poll has Alabama at number 13. I was looking at some just kind of like betting lines and who really should be going to the playoffs, and Alabama's still got about 11% chance, according to some of the Las Vegas numbers, for going to the playoffs, which to me is kind of wild because they've got already 3 losses and 2 of them were to unranked teams. But I guess the name, like, is it the name of Alabama, like, that's carrying them, where they might still have a chance to go to the playoffs? Like, do you think that's still on the table?
I don't think they have a shot, but it is, if they do, it is definitely the name.
Yeah.
I'm just stating facts here. I'm not knocking anybody. Listen, we know we're 5 and, what are we, 5 and 6?
Yep.
But I mean, they have, of the teams up there trying to get in, I think they have the worst the worst losses to Vanderbilt and Oklahoma. So yeah, I mean, if you compare that, I would say Tennessee might be next with that Arkansas loss, although they only have 2 losses. So yeah, I mean, the 3 losses, if they were to all like top 10 teams, I think you could make an argument. I don't know how you make an argument when they're to, Oklahoma and Vandy, who, while both those beat us for sure, we're not saying we deserve to be in the playoffs. So if you're making that argument, those don't need to be your losses.
Yeah, no, I'd agree. Like, to me, this seems like you take teams that have like 2 losses, and if you've had a good enough strength of schedule, like, you should get in. And then, like, if there's still potentially spots open, then you go with a 9-3 team that has the best wins, in my perspective. But I just don't. I personally don't see it. Now, if somehow Alabama comes in and like trounces Auburn, which I don't think is going to happen, but if they did, they went up like 40-7 or something nuts, and Alabama's like, no, we're here, and then I don't know, something happens, like Georgia absolutely gets blown out in like the SEC championship. Like, do you think like a scenario like that where you'd be like, well, I guess Alabama's here and Georgia just lost its way out potentially of the playoffs? Like, is that potential? Like,
I don't think so. If you're asking me my opinion, no. I don't think, I mean, I hate saying that about the team I love, but I don't think beating us badly would be enough to get you in. I think if we were a top 10 team, maybe.
Yeah.
I think, I haven't looked at the whole layout. I don't know that a 3-loss team makes it. I think the only one that has a shot is Georgia if they lose in Atlanta. I don't think, obviously, if Georgia loses to Georgia Tech and wins in Atlanta, that's also a 3-loss team getting in. Same team, but 2 scenarios how they get in with 3 losses. I don't think Alabama gets in. I don't think Ole Miss gets in. I think Ole Miss has lost to Kentucky and Florida, eliminates them. I mean, if Tennessee loses to Vandy, they're out. I mean, you could look at a scenario where, I mean, it's not impossible that the SEC only gets 1 team in.
Right. Which
now it's less likely that happens, but it's not impossible.
Yeah. Like, to me, I was thinking, SEC probably will have 3, maybe even 4 teams in the playoffs, with the way things were going midway through the season, and then it seemed like SEC teams kind of did the whole beating up on each other a little bit, and teams just started losing. And some of them, like we talked about, were unexpected, like Vanderbilt beating Alabama. Like who would have thought that or predicted that? And like nobody ever. So here we are in a kind of an interesting world of, again, like in my opinion, like a lot of these changes have been because of some NIL stuff. Because like I don't think Diego Pavia, for example, goes to Vanderbilt unless Vanderbilt throws a crap ton of money at him. But here he is, and he's playing really well. So then they beat Alabama, and things like that happen. So I just think it's kind of interesting in this world of NIL, and that's still happening. Like still players are like they're I don't know. It's kind of evening the playing field of where teams are, like, honestly, some of these teams I wouldn't have suspected would be making the playoffs. Like, for example, SMU, I wouldn't have thought, really, they're 10-1, but here they are, and they're predicted to be in the playoffs. Or like a Boise State, every once in a while they always have like a really good year, but who would have thought like somebody like Arizona State or Iowa State would also be potentially in the talks for going to the playoffs? That to me is wild that we're in this kind of world.
They talked about it was going to devalue the season. I think it's made it more exciting. I mean, all the games that matter this weekend. Whereas if there was only 4 teams, not much would matter. I mean, I think you pretty much got your 4, right? I mean, maybe you swap out the 4th team. Maybe you have to worry about that. But right now, it's like you're right. Like every conference has an important game this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's made it super exciting. They need to have, not the point of this podcast, but they got to have some kind of restrictions and guidelines around transfer portal and all that, because it's 1 year and done and moving on is just kind of crazy. But but it has made more exciting. I mean, and just to piggyback real quick, I think if you said, Jared, tell me right now what happens with the SEC, I think right now Texas, Tennessee, and Georgia probably make it. But you don't have to look far and get too crazy. The way Vandy's played this year, they finished with Tennessee. You don't have to get too crazy to see a scenario where only Texas makes it.
Right.
I'm not 100% certain a Georgia team with 3 losses, even in the SEC championship game, gets in. Most people are. Most experts are thinking that they're a lock. I'm not certain. I think it depends on how well they play against Tech.
Mm-hmm.
If they beat Tech but don't play well, because listen, they've had some bad offensive games this year. They've just pulled them out. But they don't play well against Tech, and then they go in there and get beat by 2 touchdowns in the SEC championship game, which I don't anticipate either one of those to happen. But if it does, I don't think they get in.
Yeah.
Personally.
Well, and if you have Carson Beck has a multiple interception game like he's had, that's tough. Like you, even for a Georgia Tech team, like they can make this a little interesting.
It's gonna be exciting. I mean, it's in Athens, so that probably takes out any.
But Tech's 7-4 right now. Like that's much better than they have in a long time.
They're a competitive football team. It's gonna be a more exciting Georgia Tech game than it has been in a while, in my opinion. But I still predict Georgia
for
to
sure.
win that one.
Yeah. No, I still think so too. Like you got to think Georgia is gonna still put their they know if they lose that game they're out, but if they win the game and they play even halfway decent in the SEC championship game, they're probably gonna be fine and still make it to playoffs. Even if, because in my mind, like if you go to the SEC championship and you've had a decent season, which I think Georgia's had a pretty good season already. Not great, but still pretty good. You should still get in. Like, as much as I hate to say that, but I think if you just look at it, it should be that way. Let's kind of transition a little bit more, focusing in on the Alabama game. This is obviously Kalen DeBoer's first year coaching Alabama after Saban retired. Jalen Milrose had a pretty decent season, but I mean he hasn't had, I feel like, the kind of the crazy good season that I feel like everybody was hoping for. Now I still think he's obviously a very good quarterback, but I just don't done that much better other than like his running game, which right now his running game is like carrying him. But somebody even pointed out like right now, I think it was Peyton Thorne. I think he has 20 touchdowns. Like, go look him up. Do you know how many Jalen has? Milrow, I'm gonna look him up.
I think Jalen.
How many touchdowns he's got?
I think Jalen has 15 passing.
Yeah, 15. Which obviously it's not everything, like just passing touchdowns, but he does have a ton of rushing touchdowns this season. So I mean that's why he's still one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC, and he's kind of proven it. So does Jalen Milrow scare you since he's a running quarterback? And we just faced a running quarterback that actually did pretty well against us, A&M. We did it. If you look at like Diego Pavia, who I think he was still injured, so he didn't run nearly as much, but we seemed to contain him. Like, how much does somebody like Jalen Milrow scare you in the running game for this Iron Bowl?
I mean, any quarterback like that's going to always scare you. And you're like you said, we didn't do the best job against was it Marcel Reed for A&M. So, he scares me for sure. I think they're a little different quarterback. I think Reed is, at least early on in his career, is looking for the crossing routes over the middle, some more of the comeback routes. I think Milrow is more of the throw deep type guy, and let his better receivers go catch it. Mm-hmm. So, I think it's a little different in that. I think Milrow, you have to worry a little more about the big explosive play, whereas Reed was more like methodically moving you down the field and would use his leg to keep the drive alive. Yeah. So, I mean, I watched LSU and Milrow ran all over them. I mean, I think he didn't have a ton of passing yards, didn't need it. I mean, they put up 40 something and it was almost all on the ground. So you got to be ready for that. I do trust Durkin to be able to slow that enough. You can't stop that. Like, I don't know how they only scored 3 against Oklahoma. I mean, they're too athletic to hold them to 3. Can we do enough to let our offense put up points? And I think we can, but it's going to be a battle.
Oh, for sure. And I think you have to focus on Jalen Milrow's legs, taking that as much out of the equation as possible, because you even saw like last week, Jalen Milrow against Oklahoma had multiple interceptions, and they were really costly, like 3 interceptions. One was a pick 6, and so if we force him to pass the ball, I think we give ourselves a little bit more of a chance at potentially pulling this big upset off against Alabama, who right now is a 11.5 point favorite over Auburn, and I think probably rightly so. So I think it's very tough. Like, I mean, I was looking back, Auburn hasn't won in Tuscaloosa since 2010 with Cam Newton and the Cam back. So you've got a long history of not winning in Tuscaloosa, and Auburn's, they're 5-6. Let's be honest, that's where we're at. But also Alabama's 8-3. I don't think if Nick Saban's coaching this Alabama team this year, I don't believe that they're 8-3. I just don't believe it. I don't think they're that bad. So I also know like Alabama has the players to win. So Auburn's got to do some things to change things up, and we'll see what happens. Let's talk about our players to watch for this game. Start on offense, then go to defense and special teams. I'll start it out. I'm going to be watching Cam Coleman. I think we're starting to see the emergence of Cam Coleman. And I think these last 2 games where he's had over 100 yards, it means a lot. Like, it means a lot for him. It means a lot for, like, the future of our passing game, just showing Cam Coleman himself, but whoever our next quarterback is, like, we have some offensive threats in wide receiver, and Cam Coleman's the future of that. So you got to think, like, we back to Cam Coleman a good bit unless Alabama decides to double team him and just puts him under a microscope and says, nope, you're not getting the ball, Cam Coleman. But in those opportunities, you still got KLS. You still have, I don't know, Malcolm Simmons. You have Robert Lewis. You have other guys that you can go to. So I think Cam Coleman's going to be a big point of emphasis for this game that I'll be watching. Jared, who on offense are you going to be watching for Auburn?
I mean, it's got to be one of the big three, the Hunter, Coleman, or KLS. I'm going to go Hunter, I guess, because I think Alabama gave up over 200 yards of rushing to Oklahoma.
Oh, wow.
So I'm going to go Hunter. I mean, it's pretty obvious and has been to a lot of us. It took Hugh a little longer, but pretty obvious the formula to success with Auburn. Hand the ball off to Hunter. He had over 32 touches, including catches in the win against A&M. So that's my focus, man. If he gets 20 plus, I'm going to be feeling good about our chances.
Yeah, and if he can get anywhere near that 100-yard mark, if Jarquez does, you have to think. I mean, I think it's one of those stats of like every time Auburn has we have rushing game that has over 100 yards, we highly increase our odds of winning that game, and we keep proving that stat over and over. Where if you can establish some amount of a running game, which I think Jarquez is going to come in hungry and ready to beat Alabama. It's been a minute since Auburn's beat them in Tuscaloosa, and I know Jarquez and our whole team's going to be focusing in on that. I'll start out on defense, our players to watch. I'm just going to generally say secondary because I'm just thinking about Milroe's interceptions that he threw in the last Oklahoma game. I just think our secondary is, if you put them in a good spot, I think you can put Jalen Milroe in some hard situations and force him to pass the ball more than he wants to. And I think that's what happened with Oklahoma. He was having to pass the ball more than he was wanting to instead of running the ball because time was ticking down and they were down 3 scores on Oklahoma. So I think secondary is going to play a big part of that and playing some good coverage on their wide receivers. Jared, who on defense are you going to be watching for Auburn?
Boom. I think it's going to be you went with the whole secondary core, so I'm going to go the linebacking core because I think you got to spy Milroe.
Oh yeah.
And I think that when he does get outside the tackle and start running, you got to bring him down. You got to limit the explosive plays. If you make them drive down the field, I don't know that they can. Like they're a big play offense.
Mm-hmm.
And the games when it's clicking, they're unstoppable. But if you make them drive down the field by not letting them get explosive plays, you're going to give yourself a good shot. Oh,
for sure. I mean, there are plenty of games that Alabama, they just get these big plays. I mean, Auburn's kind of fell prey to this too, or you just get a 3-play drive and score on a long touchdown run or pass or something like that. But I mean, that's very much true for Alabama. I mean, I'm just looking at like scanning through their last game against Oklahoma. They had some decent drives where they had like 60 plus yards, but it only resulted in 1 field goal. Even those couple sustained drives, and one of them ended in an interception. So it's like they were struggling to finish drives, which to me is pretty wild that Alabama would be doing that, especially with an experienced quarterback like Milroe. So I honestly, I'm thinking about your linebacker pick. The linebackers are going to be key, keeping their running game in check, and that's with Milroe, that's with their running backs, and if you can contain them, I think you give yourself the best shot to win. All right, let's switch over to special teams. Jared, I'll give you first go at it. Who are you going to be watching on special teams?
I want to say our walk-on kicker who was so good, man, I got to go with Oscar Chapman. Like, what in the
I
world
know.
happened against A&M? You got to give him benefit of the doubt. That's never happened. So
Yeah.
let's assume he just had a bad dinner the night before. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I got to keep an eye on him because we can't be having 17-yard punts on the road. So, you
Yeah.
know, several people to watch, but I think that's probably one of the more important ones.
Oh, for sure. Uh, I mean, I feel like you could easily also go, especially if it's gonna be a close game, like Ian. I think Ian's gonna be very important. I'll officially say him, but I also like part of me wants like somebody like Cobb to take a kickoff back. Like how awesome would that be if we were able to do that in Tuscaloosa? So I'll say Cobb is like my honorary pick, but really I think Ian Bachon is going to be the main guy because if we end up winning this game, it's going to be because it's a close game and we've made a field goal or two. So. Uh, all right, let's go over to our score predictions. Right now, Auburn, according to ESPN stats, has a 12% chance of winning, which I'd say is about right. Like it's a tough place to play. Auburn is 5-6, Alabama's 8-3, but there's still a chance, right? And like it's a rivalry game, which I think makes any of these games just that much closer. There's lots of rivalries of like the Auburn players going to know a lot of the players on the Alabama team and vice versa. So I feel like that this is obviously a big week for the state of Alabama with this rivalry. And I'm sure there's going to be some interesting like trash talk going on around Thanksgiving, right? Between Alabama and Alabama and Auburn fans for this game. So preseason, I predicted that Bama would win by 7. You said Bama would win by 10. Let's do our score predictions for this game. The Iron Bowl 2024 edition. Jared, what are you thinking for the score prediction of this game?
Oof. I actually feel more confident that we win this game than I did at the beginning of the year, but I'm going to stick with the same spread. I think.
Yeah.
I actually feel it's a weird feeling because I don't think we win, but I have a lot more confidence in us being able to do that. So
Yeah.
I'm having to pull back from realizing that doesn't mean we win. It just means I have more confidence we could. So I'm going to go 10.
Yeah.
I'm going to go 10 Alabama.
Yeah, and I think I'm gonna stick with my 7. Like I still feel like we're probably gonna lose by a touchdown, and it could be like what you said by 10 points too. If it somehow gets to a point where we are tying things up, and that would be amazing towards the end of the game. Again, if anything, like you as an Auburn fan, like take maybe a step back from this season. Yes, it wasn't what we were hoping for, but if you can compete against Alabama and keep it within, a touchdown score in Tuscaloosa, you're building towards the future of this team and showing this team, hey, you can compete in some of the hardest environments in the country. And I think that could carry you into the off season, even if you end up losing this game. All right, so top offensive threats for this game. Again, our criteria is top touchdowns with a tiebreaker of who gets the most yards. Who are you going with? Right now we are tied 2-2, so it all really comes down to this week. And I'm gonna say, I was thinking about this. If neither of us end up picking, because we've in the last few weeks it's been weird. It feels like random people are getting more touchdowns. If one of our players gets more yards than the other, then we're gonna give the nod to them. Does that sound good?
Okay.
Okay, let's just do it that way.
That's fair.
So who are you gonna pick for this final week? It all comes down to this.
I'm not gonna overthink it. Cam Coleman.
Love it. I love it. I
Give
think
me Cam.
if Cam Coleman, my goodness, I love the dude. He's just a freshman, but it just shows me the type of receiver that you can see Hugh Freeze has in mind and why he recruited Cam Coleman. Like you can start to see it and believe it. this is the future, which is honestly like I'll take a moment. Like it's kind of weird, right? Like we've ridden running backs for so long at Auburn, and kind of wide receivers are in some ways like afterthoughts. We've had some good ones, right? But we haven't had like a headliner at a wide receiver unless you're talking about maybe like Sammy Coates or like even somebody like Darius Slayton, who wasn't really even a headliner at the time for Auburn. But here we are. We're talking about Cam Coleman. And I think that's kind of an interesting shift that I'm having to get used to. Are you having to like shift from like, oh yeah, obviously like Jarquez, duh, he's a running back. He's gonna do it, right? Like, is that a shift in your mind too?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's what Hugh Freeze is about. I think that was part of the problem at the beginning of the year. He wanted to do that out of the gate, and we weren't ready for it. I think we're more ready now, but I do think he's balanced. And people were mad about. I still hear people calling for Hunter to get more touches, and I'm okay with him getting as many. But he's got. I mean, he might have 1,300 yards by the end of this year. So I mean, it's not like he's not getting touches. I think Hugh is built more on a explosive pass play offense, and he tried to force feed that in the beginning, and now he's letting it come to the team a little better. So yeah, I mean, it is an interesting change for us. 300-yard passer and Thorne against a quality opponent is not normal for us. That happened against A&M. So yeah, I think it's a different shift. I think Cam Coleman's the guy that can handle that. He got you got to assume he's only going to get better. And so I'm totally okay focusing the offense around that.
Yeah, I just think it's like for me thinking back to like Auburn's running back and I still feel like obviously Jarquez is the headliner in a running back room, but it's just interesting to like we're focusing in more on the wide receivers, and for me that's kind of hard. Like, because I'm like, run the dang ball.
I know, and I listen, and I'm with you. And a good running game can't be stopped. Like I'm with you. Yeah. But you think about the maturation of Nick Saban. They were that way in the beginning. It was running back, and then they start bringing in like ridiculous 5-star receivers, and they start opening it up, and that's when they become even more unstoppable. So,
right,
it's a balancing act. You don't want to be too heavy one way or the other. But if you can master the passing aspect of it, it's a little more exciting offensively.
Oh, for sure. Definitely. I think my top offensive threat, like I think I'm going between either KLS or Jarquez. I'm going to go Jarquez, but I could also see KLS. So to me, it's kind of a split vote here. So I'll go KLS or Jarquez, sorry.
I thought you were about to pick two players there. I was like, wait a minute, can we pick two?
Yeah, I can pick multiple. I make the rules
I'm going to go Cam, Hunter, and KLS.
Yeah, all combined.
All combined.
Try to beat me.
Okay, who did you actually decide on? What was
your
final answer? Jarquez. Okay, final answer. Okay.
Yep, final answer. Lock it in.
Lock it in, baby.
All right, so let's finish out with the Auburn fan perspective of the SEC, and then before we know it, the Iron Bowl will be here. Let's look back and just kind of reflect, because right now with the 12-team playoff, I think you and I had discussed it, but lots of teams were playing for something this last week, which, in the previous years of a 2-team going to the national championship game, or in the last few years of the playoffs, it feels like these last couple games at the end of the season are more for like kind of like team morale, or maybe playing for like a better bowl game. But like it felt like in week 11 there were lots of teams playing for something, right? In their 11th game of the season. So I was very pleasantly surprised with a lot of these games. Like for example, Ole Miss was playing for a spot in the playoffs, and now their hopes are pretty much all but gone of going into the playoffs. Florida, of all teams, like I was not foreseeing Florida making this much of a comeback in their year, where they had essentially kind of 2 back-to-back upsets. But wow, like I would not have seen this coming, that Florida's up here and Ole Miss is essentially played their way out of a playoff game. But that is the way college football goes, and it was kind of interesting. Another one I want to talk about was Alabama. I mean, obviously that was kind of, I saw people saying, not only did Auburn beat a ranked team, but Alabama lost to an unranked team. And I was thinking back, like, when was the last time that Alabama in a week has lost to an unranked team and Auburn went to a ranked team? Like, I was thinking maybe there was a chance of when Auburn was unranked and we beat Alabama that was ranked, but I don't even remember like when that would have been. That'd have been like, I would have had to be a long time ago. Maybe like 2019 we were ranked. So I don't know. Like that's got to be a long time. So for me, this was like a little special like cherry on top that we won and Alabama lost, and so haha, love it.
Always a good Saturday.
Oh yeah. Another kind of interesting thing, and I saw this video of LSU. Some of their fans were chanting "Fire Kelly," and I was like, really? Like, I mean, I guess they're already like fed up of them, but that is the state of, it seems like LSU right now is they're just ready to say, yeah, LSU, let's go ahead and like go on to our next dude, because I don't know, maybe they're just like just completely done with them. Like, do you think that's the case?
Yeah, I think they are. I mean, I don't know that they're wrong. I mean, Jaden Daniels is doing very well in the NFL. Kelly had him for 2 years. He was amazing. And, he turned him into 9 and 4 years, but I don't know. I mean, this year has not been what they thought. I am very surprised that has not turned into closer to championship runs than it has. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I was very surprised. I thought he was a sure thing, and I mean, he's not getting fired this year, so maybe he does it next year. Who knows? But
yeah,
they just don't seem like a dominant team that LSU used to be with all that talent they have.
I know. I feel like it kind of reminds me of like Jimbo Fisher, like at Texas A&M. You're like, this guy has so much talent on his squad right now, and yet where are they finishing? They're finishing like, I don't know, middle of the pack or like middle upper pack, but they're not breaching except for every once in a while with like, I don't know. It's hard. Like, it's hard for me to see Brian Kelly kind of be successful at LSU. I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, I don't either.
I did want to give a couple of just like honorable shout outs. I know they're not SEC related, but I was looking around and look at Rhett Lashley at SMU. Are you kidding me? If they win, which they have a very high likelihood of winning next week, they're going to the playoffs. SMU of all teams. So I love it for Rhett Lashley, previous offensive coordinator under Gus Malzahn. Like, Minos, I don't want to like obviously look past Hugh because I still think Hugh's the future right now, but 5-10 years from now, and we're looking for a new coach, Rhett Lashley is going to be high on my list.
Yeah, he's doing well.
Another one that standing out to me was, like they're I think they're in the AP poll. Yeah, he said Arizona State and like 14th ranked or something. Yeah. So, and he was like 30 years old or something when he came to the staff under him. So he's a definitely young and up and coming guy, kind of like Rhett. So we'll see. Obviously how things play out with things, but I think for the time being, Hugh Freeze is for sure kind of safe and kind of showing, improving. Like we're starting to truly rebuild. It feels like in the last few weeks of this season, and that momentum will carry us into that off season, especially if we can play tight against Alabama and Tuscaloosa. I feel like that's going to be big for us.
Yes, sir.
All right, Jared, how can the people stay in touch with you?
You can find me on Facebook under my name, Jared Davis.
And you can find me on Twitter or X at AJAY_. It's always great to be an Auburn Tiger, and War Eagle.
War Eagle.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode on the E2C Network. On your way out, I want to remind you to stop by e2cnetwork.com. It's your one-stop shop for all our content across our podcast, YouTube channel, and much more. To stay up to date with us, make sure you're following social media accounts such as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. While our content here may always be Auburn sports heavy, if it's orange and blue, it's what we do. War Eagle.